king of podcasts, proudly presents The Broadcasters Podcast. The Broadcasters Podcast. A weekly media commentary talking about traditional and digital media headlines and talking to the content creators out front and behind the scenes. Here is the king of podcasts.
Welcome to episode 110 of the Broadcasters Podcast. It's going to be because the action is a little bit kind of quiet. We're waiting for certain things to happen. You know, the digital disruption is a little bit of a lull because we're waiting for Peacock to go ahead and be released. We're waiting for a few things to happen. We're waiting for Netflix to see where they're going to be going with things. How the new, how Apple TV is kind of coming into play. There's a lot of new projects coming in. Amazon's doing their stuff. There's a lot of content creation being done. Strike stuff we're waiting on right now. I do have some news that's coming up that is promising. And an interesting story tonight about the state of female artists in country radio. And country music, as a matter of fact. So I think that's an interesting couple of stories. Plus, as promised, I have my continuing interview with Joshua Otten, the CEO at Ronin Content Services, co-founder of content and original productions at PRØHBTD. Take the vowels except for the O out of the name, PRØHBTD. And that's PRØHBTD.com. So that's where you can find that. And again, we talked to him about different areas when it comes to content creation and what he's been offering to different digital streaming outlets. We talk all about that. And actually, his new service called socialclub.tv, I believe it is called, is already underway. So that's great news for him. Let me go ahead and make sure to double check on that. I want to make sure I didn't give the wrong name of it, but it's great. He's all set to go. That's right. It was the socialclub.tv service, which is launched, and that is now being made available. It's actually starting up, and I believe it's now available on Pluto TV. So congratulations to Josh and the team for getting that all put together. There you go. And, I can take a couple minutes to go ahead and, before we get started, just to go ahead and make mention of some following up of the radio business. And, we did talk a lot about the issues when it comes to radio and just where, I'm hearing all the things that happen when it comes to what Bob Pittman said last week at the, which, by the way, I'll tell you that too. Bob Pittman spoke at the Podcast Movement Evolutions Conference. I didn't get a chance to, I didn't bring it up on the program here. I did talk about it, though, on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/jbrasco951. And on that, I brought up the story about how Bob Pittman, he brought up a number of things, but let me go and pull that up for you. And I said on the video, he's a wolf in sheep's clothing, and I don't understand why people are listening to him for podcasting advice. And again, I do not want to knock Podfest Expo, which actually I was going to go to, and I had the chance to speak at their Pechakucha, which is an event where basically everybody gets to go ahead and line up and have 7-minute presentations back to back to back to back. It's like 15 people that get to do that, and they go over a couple of hours. You get slides, and they're automatically like boom, 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 boom. You go and do it. So Chris Minos and the team there, they were great. We were going to try to put them together so that the folks at my employers at Webmaster Radio and Cannabis Radio were going to go to the event. But, we had other scheduling conflicts, which didn't allow us to do that. So I didn't get a chance to go and speak at the show. But, I support that they're doing it really well. That's coming up, I think, March 6th, 7th, and 8th, podfestexpo.com. So Chris and the team there, shout out to you. I hope everything goes well. It's a good show where, it's a lot of grassroots podcasters. Not so much like the big establishment, big corporate types, it looks like. And not a lot of the companies that are offering services. More of a show for the podcasters, which is very interesting about them. Now, I do want to mention one thing. My boss did bring this up earlier today, and I thought this was actually fascinating that I heard about this. But that Staples, and okay, I do need to bring this up. I forgot to bring this up. So Staples is opening podcast studios in 6 of its stores in Boston. This is an interesting story. Customers will have access to professional equipment and discounted hosting. So here's what's going on. Staples' latest ploy to get people into retail stores is podcast recording booths. So Spreaker, the podcast company, announced as part of a collaboration bringing recording spaces to 6 Staples stores in the Boston area. The booths are part of a new Staples Connect model in which the retail stores offer co-working and community event spaces. Pretty cool. So the soundproof Staples Connect podcast studios developed in partnership with iHeartRadio, will include professional equipment, a Rodecaster Pro control board, Rode microphones, and Shure headphones, space for up to 4 people, 60-minute session, $60, and a dedicated in-store specialist will be on hand to help with any recording issues. And customers will have access to discounted hosting and distribution through Spreaker and cut-rate editing through We Edit Podcasts. That's a pretty good deal. And so this would be an alternative for those that want to do a do-it-yourself podcast setup. Whether studios can save brick-and-mortar retail is another question. So there you go. Spreaker is being a part of this. I thought it was actually quite a good story, but, wanted to bring that up as well, let people know about that. That's an interesting story. Now, let's get back to the heart of the matter, the news that does matter here on the show. Oh, back to Bob Pittman before I go and move on to that. So, look, when it comes to the podcast industry, there's a thought where it's much like how SiriusXM started off. They needed to bring some celebrity, some star power into the mix. And Bob Pittman, for his credit, he has a legacy of doing a lot of stuff with MTV and other things. But the truth is, when you're hearing all this, and I'm like, man, people are listening to him, and he has failed so badly. And look, is it necessarily him that actually did the failing? I mean, I have to feel like it is. He's the face of it. And he's also getting a bonus for it every time, $1 million plus every quarter, whatever it is. He's making bonuses on top of his regular salary. Like it's $1 million salary, $1 million a year, plus he's making an extra $2 billion a year on his salary. Look, maybe that's not a whole lot for a CEO, but for this guy to get the kind of money he's getting for a company that's failing. I mean, look, yeah, do I want to give benefit of the doubt to the fact that's the radio division that's the one that's really hemorrhaging funds? And all they keep doing is micromanaging and cutting and cutting and cutting. And, they're not even cutting costs. It's not that they're not even like putting the money away and doing it for something else. They're putting it into machinery. They're putting it into automation. So they're taking actual jobs away and they're cutting down local studios. So there's not even local studios to be had. Listen, I didn't say this on the YouTube video, which is a part of a series called When I'm Not Podcasting. You can find it on all the major platforms like you normally do. Okay. And you can see also a link to it at broadcasterspodcast.com. But now here's the thing. I did not bring this part up. You could nationalize radio, right? I mean, there's a point where the Nash FM project was being done by Cumulus. They were doing the same idea. They wanted to go and have this particular brand, but I don't think they had a full national. Like they did have the morning show, I think was national, but then they had other day parts. The truth is, you do a show that could be whatever, and you do it for different areas. The truth is, you should do something where if you want to do iHeartRadio, listen, this is free advice from King of Podcast. Take it for what you will, whatever value you like. If you want to go ahead and do something with this and not go local, okay, fine. Well, then listen, you leave it up to the local news people that are doing like emergency forecast stuff. Like, go to Channel 5 or go to your local, TV stations. Have them put the information out there. You already do FTP with these people. You could have them send information and they feed it in. And you have it on a regular basis, like every hour. If you want to do like an hour, minute, news minute, something like that. There's a reason why BBC Radio does such a good job. They have their news beat. It comes out every half hour. It's 2 minutes. Or they do a longer version later in the day. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Why that format feels like it's so dated and bad, I don't know. But then the other thing, too, is if you're running these stations and you nationalize it and you get some good ground floor sponsors that will be there and you make them sponsor as opposed to putting in ads on a regular basis and putting so many ads in like it's a talk show format. You don't do that. You make it where, okay, you want to be CHR, you want to make a KISS, then make a KISS across the board. You want to make it AMP, make it AMP across the board. But I know that's Intercom. That's a different story. But if you want to do that, then do it. And then, you know what? You have music, but make sure you play the top music. Not this Ryan Seacrest curated media-based bullshit. You need to be ahead of the game. And I don't think the music mix, if you change it for different markets, would be too much. But what you do is you make certain day parts available local. And that's what you do. Or not local, you make them regional, right? Maybe you want to do it by time zones, go for it. Show based out of Chicago, show based out of New York, show based out of Miami, show based out of Denver, whatever, or show based out of LA. And you do that. And then you have like one national show that goes in the morning, and that goes like that. Or you do it like, kind of split. So Eastern Central, they get a morning show. You make that morning show go 5 hours. 5-hour morning show that goes up for the West Coast. And then you do day parts that are local. And then you do another same way you do where you're running stations, you're running national programming, afternoon drive. And there you go. And then you solidify and you find voice tracking, or you find something else of your other stations to take care of 6 hours of programming, and then make the rest of it voice track at the end, or just, let it be without voices at night. I don't know. But actually, there should be people all the time. And then what you do is you start bringing in talent. You bring in artists, you bring people in, and then you say, oh, okay, this is a great idea. Let's get more people involved. Let's get people in here and say, okay, let's get the artists in here. Billie Eilish, come to the studio in New York, in Chicago, wherever you are, in LA. If Ryan Seacrest has to be a show, then make him a show across the board. But then, it's not so much you have to be Ryan Seacrest. I think you find somebody else better, like a Valentine or whatever. In New York, maybe not Elvis Duran, you find somebody else. Because you need to be not a morning show where it's like full of talk. It should not be that. Your morning show should be a couple of choice segments. You make it old school. A couple of choice segments, lots of music in the morning. And the same way across the board, unless you have actual reasons to have people on. Not just segments, sleaze, gossip, not that. You get actual artists there. You get guests on. You actually find things that are actually important. And you're not doing just the news. You bring original, engaging content. And if you're not getting the people going into particular cities because they're in small towns or whatever, then you know what you do? If it's in the big towns, in the big cities, then you're going to get real audiences. Put a phone number out. Let them engage, or get them on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. Nationalize it. BBC Radio does a great job. That's a great model. And other countries do the same thing. And it doesn't have to be a non-profit model like the government-owned BBC or CBC. No, of course not. But they should take that idea and run with it. iHeartRadio could take it. They have the resources. Consolidate this and let your best talent out there. Then also have them engage with your audience, and don't worry about it being, if it's a national audience, and then you have all these different people from all over the country that will get their voices heard, and you put it up there. Man, I could come up with an idea like this and it would be great. But of course, hey, who am I? That's the kind of stuff I think about. Okay, moving along to main story to start off with. This story coming out of Deadline.com. Today, I can't believe it. Oh, this was from yesterday. The Writers Guild of America, speaking with the big three talent agencies, they're agreeing to mediation, but don't hold your breath, says David Robb. Let's read it. Now, this has been updated with a statement from the WGA. So they're going to resolve their ongoing legal dispute through mediation, which is the standard procedure ordered by the presiding judge that doesn't signify a breakthrough in the case in which each side is accusing the other of antitrust violations over packaging fees. So again, mediation, good news. At least they're trying to get to the table. I like that. Now, WGA source said, quote, the court rules to require the parties in every case to designate a mediator. There's no plan to conduct a mediation. No party is suggesting that mediation would be helpful at this point. So attorneys for both sides agreed that a neutral attorney, Gail McDowell Title, will serve as panel mediator in the case. Now, here's what's going on. There's a lot of mumbo jumbo here I don't want to talk about. So back into the story. WGA is currently in a 10-month standoff going back to April with the major agencies. And they are now working with the big three agencies, which is WME, CAA, and UTA. To date. Now, here's the thing. The reason everybody's all hung up is packaging fees and the Code of Conduct, which banned packaging fees and agency affiliations with corporately owned production and distribution entities, and has been modified by the Guild to allow all signers to continue packaging until July 15th, 2021, and even longer if two of the big four agencies don't cave and accept the Guild's terms. To date, none of the agencies are indicating they want to sign. The Guild's new franchise agreement also allows signatories to own up to 5% of an affiliated production entity. So there are other mid-tier agencies that have signed so far, but the big four have not done anything yet. They're not ready to do it. And that's the biggest problem there. Okay. Female country radio. Now, the 2020 country radio seminar is going on this week in Nashville. And there was a story that was being brought up. Why aren't there more female artists getting a fair shake on country radio? Radio Income reports. So here's what they're saying. And with CMT, Country Music Television's Equal Play campaign, there was a new 28-page study that was done on the topic of female artists in country radio. And this was done by University of Ottawa adjunct professor Jada Watson. And this was a study that included data from 2002 to 2018 and includes new data from last year, 2019. Now, we'll talk a little bit about what was being said, because here's the original one. The research says that female artists are only airing 10% of the time. CMT and Coleman Insights released new research about listener habits. And they said that research shows that 84% of listeners want equal play for women on radio, and 7 out of 10 want to hear more female artists. So going into the actual report they have, Watson zeroed in on 10% for many data points, saying that 10% is a key statistic for women in country music. It represents the space that women occupy within country music culture by 2019. And depending on the time of day a listener tunes into the local station, is barely enough to be heard. Quote, it's certainly not enough exposure to become known, to build a fan base, to climb charts, to gain enough recognition, to have access to opportunities and resources within the industry. And you know what? I never listen to enough country radio, but it is true. A lot more men get played. So, Jordan Davis, Jimmy Allen, and Kane Brown, and Luke Combs. Yeah, there's a whole lot of play of them, but there's a lot of good female artists. Maren Morris, Kelsey Ballerini, Carrie Underwood, Carly Pierce. I mean, there's a lot. And that's really odd. And honestly, okay, I'll tell you like this. When it comes to females on the radio, this is where I think when people talk about diversity, it's not so much the fact that there has to be representation. Like there should be. Because let's be honest, there's a lot of great, talented, lovely Taylor Swift. There's a lot of good country artists. Maybe some stuff that Taylor Swift still does might fall in the country or might still get played on country stations just because. But I mean, for my own end of the bargain, I always think about how many great women there were in music in the first place. I mean, think about it. The legends of country music: Patsy Cline, Loretta Lynn, Tammy Wynette. Come on. And when I think about the 90s, you had Kathy Mattea, you had Shania Twain, Alison Krauss and Union Station. I mean, come on. That was all great music. And I don't get what, I think of Sarah Evans. I think, oh my God, there's so many good songs. And the fact that for me, when I worked at the Spanish radio station last year, and I was programming music for that station, Spanish radio also has the same issue, where it's hard to get good female artists and find the music to put on. And for me, when all these stations are playing salsa music or reggaeton or bachata, the thing is there's only so many artists. It's like rap. It's like there's only a few certain artists that get to play. But my thing was I personally looked for the best female music there was. So Carol G or Becky G or Rosalia now is a new star that's up and coming. And I think of, we had a lot of salsa music from India. And I think about just a lot of artists that were like that. I was just thinking, I always made sure to find artists that were playing, it might have been Spanish pop, but I didn't care. I wanted female singers that sang good in Spanish. I wanted to put that on that Spanish station because it was important. It wasn't a lot of bachata music that had that, but Spanish music, I wanted more females to be out there. I wanted to have that kind of music played. I would personally dig and find music that would be fitting for the audience, that fit the format that was more female. I wanted 50-50. That's what I wanted. I mean, why not? I mean, the thing is, look at pop music. Look how well and how successful it is. And how many wonderful, dreamy, beautiful sounding, beautiful looking pop stars are out there. I mean, I can name them all over the place. Think about it. Dua Lipa and Taylor Swift and Ariana Grande. And I love Billie Eilish's music. I love her music. And Selena Gomez. So much out there. Even the rappers I see, like Megan Thee Stallion, she's got good stuff right now. I really love her stuff. I'm enjoying Doja Cat. Like, there's a lot of good stuff out there. And I love the idea of hearing more women in music and on the radio, most important. I love that. I would love to hear more of that. Because, music, that's an equal form right there altogether. Like in every genre, there's always great female representation. I mean, think about with rock music, man. Come on, classic rock, Heart, right? Fleetwood Mac. Come on. It was all great stuff. I mean, there's just the thought where I can't believe that actually is a problem these days. And I was really surprised to read that. But it's another story I thought I wanted to bring up real quick and just pass along. One more thing I want to talk about. I talked about last week about about NPR, right? Was it last week or the week before? I believe it was the idea of, it was last week, where NPR, in the latest Trump administration budget proposal for fiscal year 2021, the idea of phasing out NPR and PBS in 2 years. Well, we talked about that, pulling the plug on public broadcasting international media. Well, international media, we talked about that as well. But there's another part of international media, because public service media is under fire even outside of America. So here's what it is. There was an opinion piece by the Financial Times saying a world without public service media will be a darker place. This is from Catherine Tate, and she's the CEO and president of Canada's national public broadcaster, CBC. Now, she says that the UK government has questioned the BBC's impartiality, and the specter has been raised of scrapping the TV license fee that British households pay, as the broadcaster has announced job cuts as part of the savings drive. Australian police raided the offices of the ABC, Australian Broadcasting Company, purportedly seeking evidence gathered by the state broadcaster related to the national security activities of the country's special forces in Afghanistan. Danish public broadcaster in 2018, DR, announced 400 job losses, the closure of 3 of its TV channels and 3 radio stations as part of a package of reforms that cut its budget by up to 20%. And while all of us accept that public organizations created 80 years ago warrant modernization, we should proceed with caution. Her own organization, CBC Radio Canada, is lucky that support from many stakeholders, including government, is holding firm, operating on the same principles as many of our counterparts. Clear journalistic independence from government, a mix of public and private funding, and a mandate to inform, enlighten, and entertain. So they're also under review. There was a report last month on the legislative framework governing Canada's broadcasting and telecom sectors. Public hearings are coming up on the renewal of the TV and radio licenses. In these reviews, they're going to defend public service media and the critical role they play in a healthy democracy. At the moment, CBC Radio Canada operates in 6 time zones, 2 official languages, English and French, 8 indigenous languages, delivering on services on TV and radio, a full slate of digital services. And this is at a cost of $25 annually per Canadian, less than most of our peers across the globe. But there's mounting debate about the raison d'être. Raison d'être. Is that how it says? I don't know. So the critics say that with state funding comes political meddling, despite the robust safeguards in our journalistic standards and practices. Well, we're not talking about so much about the news, because mostly it's the opinion that gives that kind of problem. So in this story, they talk about how do we secure a safe public space for civic exchange? How do we secure a place for fact-based argument, for science, for enlightenment? I hope we pause and reflect on how we can bring public service to the internet, that we consider what is at risk, nonpartisan, validated, fact-checked information. Imagine the alternative, a world where the interests of underrepresented communities have no place, where the voices of minorities are extinguished once and for all. That will be a world without public service media. But the story must continue. Do we need to continue to have public service media? And I should go look for some guests that can actually answer that question. I am looking at some new guests, looking at some new interviews coming up. I don't know what I'll have for the next few weeks, but I am making some inroads, and I put another feeler out there for some new guests. And I'll get back to you about that. I had a few people that are trying to get on board, but we couldn't get them on locked in. But we'll work on that. We'll work on that for everybody. Meantime, we're going to leave it there. And it's time for our feature interview, part 2 of my interview. Once again, with the CEO of Ronin Content Services and the co-founder of Content and Original Productions at PRØHBTD, Joshua Otten, here on the Broadcasters Podcast. So let's go last couple of years for the Oscars. The examples of Roma, well, I think was winning, I forget if it won Best Picture for Academy Award 2 years ago. And it was just a foreign film that Netflix acquired to release on their own platform, as opposed to getting to the theaters. The Irishman getting nominated this year is the same thing. But the thing is, if you're trying to attract stars like they are now, then again, we've seen movies that have been, produced as star vehicles, say, Julia Roberts doing Homecoming, which I don't think was that great of an event. Triple Frontier that Ben Affleck done, which was kind of a half well done movie to me. I just thought when you're leaving it to the talent to have their own executive producer title to certain productions where they don't have the management of the big moguls telling them, no, the story should be like this. They want to have autonomy. But then if a Netflix is trying to draw on that type of big money talent, they're going to have to spend that money, but there's no guarantee that talent is going to know what they're doing, unlike the studios and the directors do, to create the right kind of vehicle that's going to be for your consideration.
Yeah, well, I can't really speak on that, except for that I could point at. Here's what I can do. I can point at, Adam Sandler, and sort of the whole knock on Adam Sandler was he was doing these quote unquote terrible movies with Netflix, and I'm not going to say whether they're terrible or not. I haven't honestly watched them, but they were kind of lowbrow, and everyone was surprised, and then everyone said how bad they were, and they had 4 or 5 picture deal, and Adam Sandler lost his way. But I don't think he cared. He was having fun. It was a great way for him to hire his friends. And then, by the way, he did Uncut Gems, and he did a sort of an Academy level movie afterwards anyway. So it is, I don't know if there's a rhyme or reason, but I think they're trying to play in all the sandboxes, and it's interesting to see what happens.
And I think for Adam Sandler in that example, I just think the fact that, I think Netflix just said, well, just do the same kind of, give us Happy Madison again. Just give us that. Give us, Waterboy. We want those kind of movies again. Make those kind of movies with you and Drew Barrymore, 51st Dates. Make another one of those. So I think there's probably something to be said about what they told them to go do. And maybe there's just like, okay, well, at least I get to do it my way. So that's the whole point.
Right.
But I mean, that really comes down to it. Now back to, the people that you are hiring for these projects, because this is where I want to get to, which I think would be a great opportunity for you, Joshua. LA Times put out a long story this past week about the upcoming labor issues, and this is what they said. And this is the real crux of when I talk about the content creators, for the people that are really doing the hard work, putting their hands dirty, getting the productions done on time, under budget. Studios, quote, production companies and guild members are all eager to avoid a sequel because the last disruption cost the state of California an estimated 37,700 jobs. That's huge. And $2.1 billion in lost output from late 2007 to the end of 2008, according to a 2008 Millikan Institute report. The Writers Guild has reported that employment for film writers has reached levels not seen for 20 years, with about 1,000 screenwriters reporting more than $100 million in earnings each quarter, up from 700 writers in prior years and nearly 5,000 members working in TV for the last 5 years. So the thing is, these people are not going to want to cross picket lines, but for outlets that are not anywhere involved in the labor unions, I would imagine, like you said, if they're not going to go ahead and work off of the union pay, and it's something that you can't necessarily go ahead and fork that much into, if they're going to go ahead and come off the union banner and take projects where maybe they just go ahead and go independent and decide, I can't work with having to pay my dues. My dues are not getting me anywhere, and now I'm stuck in another strike. So how about I just get out of this, extricate myself, and work with a company like Prohibited and work on content for Social Club TV? Do you think there's an opportunity in terms of content and personnel that might get to work with you guys?
I don't think that the strike necessarily or sort of any labor issues would have a meaningful impact on sort of our ability. But listen, I have a lot of friends who work in the industry. I see, it's fun. They love pitching to us. They love coming to us ideas, and I think they don't really know how to approach it. Meaning, again, we're at a lower budget tier. I mean, I like to say we're again, from a content perspective, the value, how the perceived value and the quality is up there with the Vice, but then the gap between Vice and Netflix is massive. it's almost greater than the gap between us necessarily and like say just a YouTube star who's shooting something on his iPhone. It's just astronomical. And so the economies of scale at that stage don't actually work. But here's the thing. There's a show called Dope State that we distributed and I helped exec produce. And I don't know if you heard about it, but basically it was Dan Harmon, who does Adult Swim, and he had Harmon Studios, and was created by a guy named Gabriel Sunday. He directed it, he produced it, he wrote it, and he starred in it. He had Adrian Grenier from Entourage. He had the Lucas brothers. He had Dan Harmon, and it was scripted. It was a scripted 22-minute show, and there's 6 episodes. So he produces outside of the typical Hollywood studio system. We've been distributing it. It's gotten huge views and huge numbers on Pluto. We're now distributing it as part of our own platform. We actually just closed a deal with Reverie TV, which is an LGBTQ OTT platform, similar to Social Club TV. They're distributing it with us. And I see this as the formation of a new model. And the new model will allow, whether you're union or not, the ability to produce, create, and own your own content. We don't own it. They own it. They own the IP. The idea is this continues to monetize over time. We kind of have a back-end model that works for independent content creators, and it allows them to create high-quality content that they can, own, and we help distribute, syndicate, monetize. We got it on iTunes and Apple TV as well. But I look at that, and it does answer your question, which is yes, this can be a platform and a home and a destination, along with others in our sort of size and network for premium content creators. They're going to have to be scrappy. They're going to have to, want to, reduce their fees potentially and kind of work for ownership in the product that they're creating. But the opportunity, they get to create it. They have their own creative control. They don't, they get to own the product. And, we're going to help make sure that there's eyeballs on it and it's monetized.
And that's the whole point. I would rather, when you have to go and fight hard with corporate suits and deal with all the red tape of mediators and people that are in between that are supposed to be in your best interest, but taking a cut of what you're making, why go ahead and go to that route when you can, at this day and age, the way things are, the way digital streaming is now, the way the old model of networks and studios and having that goes, pitch to broadcast or cable, that's all gone. It's a totally open door. And so I don't know what's going to happen with these labor unions. And I appreciate you answering questions about that. This is not it's not an easy subject for anybody to talk about, especially so early in the process. I just know it's going to happen. I feel bad for those that are going to be in the crossfire here, but I can look at the chance that, at least you're not going to have people that are going to be shut down, not be able to do projects. Hopefully there might be a chance that some people will say, screw this. Is there any work you got going on, Joshua, that I can be a part of? Or is there something I can pitch to you in terms of a project that we can get together on and collaborate on? That's the whole idea. If that opens up the door. Now, here's the other thing I got to ask. Quote, as in the same article from LA Times, quote, as streaming takes over the traditional broadcast network TV model, which obviously we see what BBC does and we see what Netflix has done. We're all seeing the shorter, limited series format. You just mentioned the series with Adrian Grenier and the Lucas brothers and Dan Hartman, which, by the way, if Dan Hartman didn't have the chance to, if he didn't do a show like Community, so he could create an Adult Swim show like Rick and Morty, thank God. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. I love that show. Mm-hmm. Here's the idea. They're talking about now that studios are commissioning shorter seasons and writers are losing out on revenue for what have been syndication or reselling of their shows. So the question is now, with this situation over, the shortening of seasons, about, seeing broadcasts and cablers and other outlets, miffing on potential projects, would this open the door for content providers like yours to pitch more projects? And are there any new concepts that we're looking at right now that you're looking at yourself that completely changes the model altogether that you think would be a viable project for somebody to put out there that will be completely different than the norms of any of the norms we have now? 6 episode, 13, 22, what have you?
Well, I think so. I think if you want to go into the crux of it, what creative people bring to the table that whether you're a Netflix or Hulu can never really do is they're creative. They build the IP. And I think if you look at it like what they're creating is intellectual property, right? It's content, it's shows, it's comedies, whatever it might be. retaining ownership of that IP is so integral, because what that allows you to do is, if you create this world, that world can go into books, that world can go into movies. Who knows what the future is going to be in terms of even content consumption? How is VR plus AR going to take over? Are we going to have some sort of Matrix-like, virtual experience in 50 years where we're going to have everything be so immersive? And the only thing that will have value in these universes is going to be the IP. When you have massive shifts in how people consume content, that requires the people who own the IP to recreate it, but it allows them to remonetize it. I think the shift, if I were a content creator, I facilitate content creation, I distribute it, monetize it, and I do create ideas and work with content creators, but I look at it like, own the IP, start there, and take a risk working with a company like myself, or starting up and finding financiers to own it, because if you create something great, then down the line, I'll pick it up. Other places will pick it up. Netflix will eventually pick it up, because they're going to have to acquire more stuff. They can't just finance everything until they're broke. But if you own and retain that IP, then over time that becomes a library. And I didn't invent that. George Lucas was one of the first geniuses that really owned it, right? I mean, that's what he did with Star Wars and everything else. He owned the IP, and that's what made him a billionaire. And that's why Disney acquired it. And you look at the same thing with Marvel. Comics, were for a long time, you'd have your random Superman or Batman movie, but for the most part, it wasn't a cornerstone of tentpole movies. They were comics. But the IP means that for the rest of the lives of all of these movie studios, the people who participate in that ownership will always have some control over what's done there. And so I think that's the way I would approach it. And where we want to sit in this ecosystem is to create IP that we can, create products around or create more shows around. We want to work with content creators who create their own IP and help them monetize it and distribute it, like Gabe Sunday and Dan Harmon. And we're actually, as a platform, we're enabling content creators to go to brands and say, hey, will you help underwrite this show, because Social Club TV is going to distribute it, and they're going to guarantee us, me the content creator, you the brand, that there's going to be 5 million people who will watch it, because we can track it and we can show the metrics of it. We know how much people watch our content.
What's also interesting, and I want to bring up, and I really appreciate you answering questions about when it comes to what the content creators, because really I'm talking about the union stuff with you, because from the content creator standpoint, and for those that are working with content providers, and for networks like yours, with PRØHBTD and Social Club TV, these are important questions to answer. And for those that are content creators that want to be a part, they need to understand what the situation is leading into what's going to be happening for this year, because the environment's changing. It's ever changing. The ground underneath them is definitely shifting. The tectonic plates are moving around. It's like an earthquake, as if it's in California. So another thing that came from the same LA Times article, they said that the streaming revolution has brought in new tech giants into the Hollywood market. So Amazon and Apple are in. They don't have a history of dealing with unions. Netflix, which is not a member of the Producers Alliance, the Los Gatos company, has started forging its own labor deals, including a landmark contract with SAG-AFTRA this summer, which would give it a competitive advantage in the event of a work stoppage. The ability to negotiate a separate deal with Netflix would also give the Writers Guild and other talent unions some leverage with the studios. Contract for SAG-AFTRA, the Directors Guild of America, expired June 30th. Again, all these deals start coming down between last April into June 30th, and all these things could be in a negotiating mix, and it's all upon what the over-the-top networks overall will be able to offer. And the other thing you have is the corporate behemoths that could take a harder line with unions and have more resources to fight against the other guilds. At the same time, they need talent more than ever to feed the new streaming pipelines in order to compete with Netflix. So my thing is to look at it from your perspective, Joshua. When you see all this going on, would you be open to having dialogue with any of these organizations if you knew that meant you could bring some really great talent to work on your projects?
Absolutely. I mean, again, I'm a big fan of the unions. I'm a big fan of living wages. I'm a big fan of people who create the product and the content, having ownership and equity stakes and participation in it. Again, we're so nascent. We're a 6-month-old company. So on a model size for us, I think, I'm probably not going to be able to be reactive where I'm going to say, oh, this is an opportunity to go out to figure out a deal that could be made now. I see something though, again, I want to get into more scripted. I think Dope State was the first scripted project that we had an opportunity to get involved with. We're working with the program called High Herstory, which is kind of like a drunk history. That's kind of fun, coming out of New York, and we're enabling those content creators to, produce and get finishing funds. I'm at the stage where I'm able to meet up with people who have created amazing stories that work for our audiences. Where in the past, what would have happened was they started it and they ran out of money, and it's just sitting there, and it's so good. They don't have a YouTube audience. These aren't influencers, right? They don't have some streaming channel on Twitch. They're creators. And so they'll create this content and they'll create these amazing shows, hoping that maybe a Netflix will pick it up. And the thing with vertical integration is you went from, the irony is you have more money than ever, right? And in theory, you have more content than ever, but you have fewer buyers than ever. You went from having 50 buyers to maybe 7. If you look at it, even if obviously there's individual networks owned within these behemoths, but it's still really consolidated. And so we're coming in here to say, let us help you finish it. We have editors. Let us help you raise money through the brands we work with. Hey, we can guarantee you eyeballs so that we can make sure that you're going to monetize this content if you want to finish it. So I think that's our sort of first step into that world of working with creators. And I think that I can then use that as a case study to go to bigger talent and show them the value of what we're doing and saying this is scalable. When we have 70 million minutes watched, but when we get to 2 billion minutes watched, all of a sudden, we'll have a very powerful network with a real draw, real audience. And we can go to brands like Grubhub and Oreos, and not just cannabis and THC and CBD brands, but we can go to mainstream, quote unquote mainstream brands like a Postmates and say, hey, we want to do a series. We're going to integrate you guys into this. We have this audience. And by the way, we're now hiring union talent because we have much bigger budgets, and we can become a signatory on a digital level. And it's a win for everyone.
So as we wrap things up, obviously there is. I'm really glad that you were able to go. You obviously have a good sense of what's going on here, and the environment that you're in. Obviously, at this moment, it's all about really the content you're getting to build out. You're trying to build out what you have here, and you're getting a chance to repurpose a lot of great new content and a lot of existing content you've been building up a great library over since 2014. So where we're at now is you have Social Club TV. It's now being made available. In addition to several new series, you're re-releasing 300 episodes, 40 hours of cannabis-friendly lifestyle content from the Heritage Library. But again, you're going to have thousands of hours of content. It's going to be made available through Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Prime, Android, and iOS. And you have a subscription service. So talk to me about the subscription service coming right now with exclusive content. What is that going to look like?
Yeah, so we're going to be launching with AVOD first. The SVOD will be a component later this year. We're going to be offering it for a way for the creators who work with us. So we have content creators that we're onboarding onto the system, like Burner as an example. And it's going to be a way for him to create exclusive content for his fans. So if you're a fan and you want to subscribe to Burner's channel for $4.99 a month, you're going to get exclusive content, exclusive window content, and things that no one else is going to see right away. And it allows us to drive one more monetization channel into content creators and help them create stuff, monetize it, and give something exclusive to their fans and their audiences. And at the same time, though, if you want to just tune in and you don't want to pay a fee, you will absolutely have access to almost the entire library, and it will be advertising supported. And we're going to be, we're working with several different programmatic ad companies who are going to be able to serve mainstream ads. One of the other things that's interesting is we're working with brands to allow brands to have their own branded channel. What that means is they're going to be able to create content themselves or have content they already created and distributed to audiences. And that will help them, do further brand discovery and help cannabis brands, as we talked about earlier, continue to destigmatize, continuing to find new marketing channels because their Instagram's getting shut down. They can't advertise on Facebook. Google's blocking them out. So we are going to be cannabis and hemp friendly. We will be compliant as well. We're going to follow all the California state guidelines in terms of, making sure the percentage of our audience is over age. But yeah, we're doing a lot of very innovative things that, I haven't seen. It's not just about cannabis. That our position is unique in content, period. There's several different companies that are doing content aggregation and distribution on OTT. There's not a lot who are doing that and creating original content on top of it. So, we're not the only ones, but I think our approach is pretty unique. That's
fantastic. So again, Joshua, thank you so much for making time to join us. Again, Joshua Otten, the CEO at Ronin, RONIN Content Services, co-founder of Content Original Productions at PRØHBTD, PRØHBTD. Please take a minute to go ahead and let our listeners know where they can find websites so we can look at everything for Ronin, PRØHBTD, Social Club TV, and where they can follow you and what all you all are doing right now leading forward, so we can see some new updates on new programming, things that are coming up. Before I ask you for that, I see that you have Pot Pie, you have Marijuana Mania. You also have programming that you're creating that is alongside with Masters of Glass with Abdullah Saeed, Pimp My Grow with DNA Genetics and Be Real from Cypress Hill. And you'll have edibles, you'll have high tech. So a lot of great programming. Tell me where they can find all this.
Thanks. Yeah. So you can actually go for Social Club TV on Instagram, and you can follow us on Instagram and be updated to when the platform will go live. In February, you can go Roku, Apple TV, Amazon, iOS, Android, and starting February, just put in Social Club TV and we'll pop up there, and you can download us and watch us and get access to all the content on launch day. And then, for production services and all the other sort of stuff we do, RoninContent.com, RoninContent.com, also has links to all of our other sites and stuff. So that is, we're really excited. And look, I really appreciate you having me on. I appreciate the in-depth conversation. It's a fascinating time to be in this environment and how quick everything is moving. So both from a cannabis perspective and a content perspective.
Absolutely. I do appreciate you making time, and thanks for really putting yourself out there and talking about everything. And, thanks for making the support with the cannabis and the hemp industry. Thank you for getting yourself out there and, putting some great content out there. Something that's definitely niche, different, and is opening the eyes to people to normalize the cannabis and the hemp industries. I think it's really great work that you're doing. Thanks again for joining us in the program.
Thanks for having me on.
That's going to do it for me. Thank you all. Shortened show, but of course, we're just waiting for news to happen. We're going to get things started ramping up, and we'll get that soon enough. And hopefully get some more interviews all locked in and ready to go. I'll let you know all about it. In the meantime, thank you for listening to the program. As always, till next week, remember, content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast, presented by BroadcastersPodcast.com and KingofPodcasts.com. The Broadcasters Podcast is brought to you by KingofPodcasts.com/Amazon. If Amazon is good enough for the King of Podcasts, it most certainly is good for you. KingofPodcasts.com/Amazon. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program, The Wrestling is Real Podcast, exclusively at KingofPodcasts.com.